All right, let's start somewhere really powerful. I want you to imagine you're in a boat, in a fjord, and you are just completely surrounded by massive icebergs. That's where we are today, in Greenland. This place has the dubious honor of being ground zero for the world's melting ice and rising seas. And that brings us to one of the most fundamental questions for our future. This question, it comes from a listener named Johan. He grew up in Greenland, but now he lives in Denmark, just 3 kilometers from the beach. And he's not really worried for himself. He's worried about his kids and their kids. His question is the question for this entire explainer. With all this ice melting, where in the world is actually safe?
Okay, so let's just start with one number. This one number really sets the stage for our whole journey. Scientists have figured out that no matter what we do now, like even if we stopped every single emission today, the Greenland ice sheet has already locked in at least 27 centimeters of global sea level rise. You can think of it like a down payment on a much, much bigger problem. It's already baked in, and that number, it's only going to go up. So our search for a new home, it really begins with understanding the scale of the problem we're up against. And believe me, it's a super complex puzzle. The answer isn't as simple as just, moving to higher ground. Let's put this in perspective for a second. If every single chunk of ice on Earth melted, seas would rise by a totally catastrophic 70 meters. But okay, deep breath, that would take at least 1,000 years. The much more urgent figure, the one we actually need to plan for, is the 1 meter of sea level rise we're on track for this century. And make no mistake about it, that 1 meter changes everything. Now, this is where things get really weird and kind of counterintuitive. You'd probably think of sea level rise like filling up a bathtub, right? The water just goes up evenly everywhere. But that's not how it works on a giant spinning planet. The ocean is, it's lopsided. And this happens because of something pretty mind-blowing. A massive ice sheet like the one in Greenland has its own gravity. It's so big it acts like a giant magnet, literally pulling the ocean water towards it. But as it melts and shrinks, that gravitational pull gets weaker. And the water doesn't just stay there, it sloshes back and redistributes itself, a lot of the time on the complete opposite side of the world. And this has some really surprising results. So for example, if you live in Denmark, you'd think your biggest threat is Greenland's, right? It's right there. But you'd be wrong. Meltwater from Greenland will actually have a much bigger impact on places super far away, like coastal cities in Asia. And on the flip side, the melting of Antarctica will hit the Northern Hemisphere harder. So here's the crucial point. To know your risk, you have to know where the water is coming from. All right, with that in mind, let's kick off our global search for a climate-resilient home. We're going to start by looking at communities that are already having to adapt in some pretty radical ways. So our first stop is in the Caribbean, just off the coast of Colombia. Welcome to Santa Cruz del Islote. This island, it's about the size of a football field and was actually built by fishermen back in the 1870s. They used seashells, coral, even garbage to literally chisel out a piece of land from the ocean. Life here is just this incredible testament to human ingenuity. It's a super tight-knit community. And hey, bonus, no cars, no traffic noise. To survive, they've become masters of being resourceful. They collect rainwater from their roofs with gutters, and they power their lives with a mix of solar panels and a diesel generator. They have truly learned how to live with the water. But this little paradise has some big problems. There's no running water, and electricity is really scarce. But more existentially, climate change is warming and acidifying the ocean. That's driving the fish away, and it's making it harder for the very creatures whose shells were used to build the island in the first place to even survive. So even this man-made fortress is under threat. Okay, so if living on the water is risky, what about getting as far away from it as possible? Let's travel to Ladakh in northern India. It's one of the highest regions in the world, a cold desert 3,000 meters above sea level. Now for a place where temperatures used to drop to a bone-chilling minus 50 Celsius, a little bit of warming might not sound so bad. And at first, it actually brings some good things. The growing season is getting longer, which means farmers can grow new crops like apples and cherries, things that were totally impossible before. The winters are less brutal, and the region's even becoming a hub for clean energy. But there is a fatal flaw in this plan. The villages here were built right in the lap of the mountains, and their size was determined by the glacier right above them that supplied all their water. Well, those glaciers are melting at an alarming rate. A lot of the smaller ones are already just gone.
This leads to severe water shortages and, paradoxically, devastating flash floods when it does rain on this super dry terrain. So our real-world case studies seem to show that even the most promising-looking safe havens have a critical flaw. And that suggests the answer isn't about finding one perfect spot. So let's shift our perspective. What if instead of looking for a new place to live, we tried to understand what our current homes are going to feel like in the future? Maybe a more data-driven approach will give us a clearer answer.
This is the work of a conservation biogeographer named Matt Fitzpatrick. He created this amazing tool that answers a really simple but powerful question. In about 60 years, what's my city's climate going to feel like? It basically translates these abstract temperature changes into something meaningful, something local. Let's give it a try. So, if you live in Chicago today, by the year 2080, your climate is projected to feel like the climate of Lansing, Kansas. That's a summer that's 3 degrees Celsius warmer and 13% wetter. That is a massive shift, about 850 kilometers south. And it means the city's entire infrastructure, which was built for a climate that won't exist anymore, is at risk. And for some places, it gets even more extreme. On the global version of this map, some locations, especially near the equator, are listed as having a novel climate. And what that means is that they're projected to become so warm that there is literally no place on Earth right now that has a comparable climate. They are heading into completely uncharted territory. So our search for some kind of geographic escape route seems to be failing. We've looked high, we've looked low, from artificial islands to mountain deserts, and every single place has a critical flaw. So let's circle all the way back to where we started, to see if maybe the answer's been there all along. And here's the final kind of ironic twist. As Greenland's gigantic ice sheet melts, the land underneath it, freed from that immense weight, actually starts to rise up. This process is called post-glacial rebound, and it exposes more land for farming or for mining. So could the source of the problem also be the solution? Well, the answer from the people who actually live there is a firm no. A local sheep farmer explains that the climate has changed completely. The fjord doesn't freeze anymore, which makes winter travel between settlements impossible. They're now facing severe droughts, forcing them to import hay for their sheep. And extreme windstorms are becoming way more common. What this trip around the world really shows us is that there is no perfect escape. Climate change is going to touch every single place in some way. So if we can't just pack up and move, we have to choose what kind of future we want to live in, wherever we are. And this, right here, is the choice. Our actions today directly determine the outcome. Under a high-emission scenario, that's the path we're on right now, we're looking at about 1 meter of sea level rise this century. But under a low-emission scenario, we could cut that down to about half a meter. So the answer to Johann's question, where do we go? It isn't a place on a map. As climate scientist Ruth Mottram puts it, the real safe haven is a lower emissions future. Because that half-meter difference, it isn't just a number. It's the difference between losing and saving countless homes, communities, and lives.